A really warm welcome at this third session of the Civic Council on European Democracy. My name is Annemarijn Epker. Some of you know me already. I'm a program editor at the Bali and project leader of the Forum on European Culture. And today I will be your host for this third session of the Civic Council. Something about the Civic Council, it's an initiative of the Forum on European Culture, a biannual festival in Amsterdam organized by the Bali and Dutch Culture, where we explore the value of culture for Europe. We organized the last edition in September 2020 during a very strange COVID situation, as you can imagine. But that was also the moment that we started with the Civic Council. And the theme of the forum was We the People. And during the festival, we explored the question of whether a European demos, a European people, does actually exist. And if so, what it would look like, actually. And we developed several theater performances, exhibitions, programs, debates, etc. during a weekend here in Amsterdam. And also the first session of the Civic Council, and the aim of the Civic Council actually is to speak with a group of international thinkers, artists, theater makers on the future of our democracies and how we can actually improve our democracies and how we could create a sense of a European demos. And that's what we did in Amsterdam for the first time. That's what we did virtually in Palermo in March, and this is actually the last session that we're organizing together with our great partner in Warsaw, Gazeta Wyborcza. And I organized this session together with the great Susanna, which was a fantastic honor. And I would like to welcome all the speakers of today. And we really have a great group here together from the field of the arts, from the literature, from theater, also from the media and the judicial fields. So it's really great that you're all here with us today. A lot of speakers from Poland this time, a lot of speakers from other European countries. So we're really having a good mix, I think, to focus on our main theme of today. I'm really sad we could not organize this session live in Warsaw. We really had hoped that that would have been possible, and it would have been great to meet you all. But also I'm really happy that you're here with us via Zoom, and I really very much hope that we will be able to meet each other live in the future someday. But this Civic Council is really a working session, and it's an experiment that we're doing with the group. And in this session, we will discuss how culture and the media can, on the one hand, really help to safeguard democratic values, but on the other hand, can also be very effective tools for to spread nationalism and populism in a country. And that's the question that we would like to discuss today with you. And secondly, we would also think it's very important to see how culture and the media can actually contribute to this idea of a European people, a European demos. And we have some great speakers on board. We have invited Miloš Wiatrowski to kick off this session with a keynote on the role of the media. And we would also love to hear your ideas on that, of course, as well. So after his keynote, we will open up the discussion. And we have also asked two very special speakers to reflect on his keynotes. And we will start with Juri Albrecht. He's the director of the Bali and curator of the Forum on European Culture, to start with the reflection. Then we open up the discussion a bit to the rest of the group. And after that, we have asked Sylvia Gregorczyk Abram to reflect on the keynote of Miloš. And she is an attorney at law and social activist. She works with a lot of NGOs on developing a democratic civil society, which aims to protect the rule of law in Poland and in the Polish judicial system. So I'm very much looking forward to that first part of the discussion. We will have a short break of 5 minutes, and then in the second part we will focus more on the role of culture. And for this part we have asked Olga Brzezinski Brzezinska, the co-founder of the City of Literature Foundation, to present a keynote and some other reflections, which will be given by author and journalist Simon Strauss from Germany, and the conductor and director of the Wroclaw Opera, Bassem Akiki, to reflect as well. And in the meantime, please just raise your hand if you want to say something, because we aimed for some structure in this session, but it's also an open think session where you can all jump in whenever you want. So please feel free to do so. By the end of today, we really hope to have a list of ingredients, a list of ideas that we can form into one piece where we collect all the input from the first, second, and third session to write something about how we can improve our democracies in Europe. So that's kind of the end goal. We will write an article about it. And of course, I hope that many of you will also sign it and share it afterwards. So that was my introduction, and that was already a lot of information, I think. So I would like to give the Zoom floor to Milos Wiatrowski to present his keynote.
Thank you, Anne-Marijn. Zoom floor, I haven't heard that before. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to try to... Oh, I'm really sorry in advance. I have 2 dogs and 3 cats, so there might be some interference. Hopefully it will be fine. Usually my dog just barks at the beginning when I start to speak, and then he calms down. So the topic of my keynote is, as Anne-Marijn said, media in Poland. And on one hand, how, well, I wouldn't necessarily say help bolster our democracy, because our democracy right now is kind of faltering. So in a way, how independent media are trying to make this authoritarian turn more difficult, and in that sense, protect or defend democracy. But on the other hand, how the state-sponsored and state-owned media are really playing an important role in this all-out assault on Polish democracy. So just to give you a brief overview of where are we now in terms of media in Poland. Ever since 2015, so since the elections where the current government took power, Poland dropped had a huge drop in terms of media freedom rankings. So in 2015, Poland was ranked 18th worldwide, so pretty good. I mean, 18th worldwide is really impressive. Now Poland is 64th, and the important part to remember here is that this was not a one-off drop. Literally every single year since then, there has been a drop of several places in the ranking, which shows that this is a continuous work. We probably didn't really hit the bottom yet. The bottom is kind of continues to shift even lower. One of the reasons why Poland ranks so Poland's ranking is so weak right now in terms of media freedom is the role of public-owned media, so this state-owned media, public broadcaster, both TV and radio. During last year's presidential elections, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, so as you probably know, the organization that is usually in charge of, for example, visiting and monitoring elections and evaluating whether elections were free and fair. So the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe considered that the public broadcaster did not meet its legal obligation to inform objectively and impartially, and it functioned as a tool for running the campaign of the incumbent president. In a way, one can say that this in itself made the election not free or not fair, at least. Well, it was free, everyone could vote. I can actually talk about why not, but it's kind of hors sujet. However, it wasn't necessarily fair, and that also shows us the role that media, in this case, state-owned media, can play in degrading democracy. They can be a tool of propaganda rather than a tool of information. Another way in which Polish media are being hampered, the independent side of Polish media are being hampered by the government, is through strategic lawsuits against public participation. Those are the kind of lawsuits that are brought by usually state institutions, and their only or main goal is to silence journalists, is to create a freezing, a chilling effect. This can take many forms. One of them is, for example, filing multiple lawsuits concerning a single article, which raises the legal costs considerably. A lot of them are, others include asking punitive compensation. So for defamation, a politician or minister of justice or a state-owned company can ask, and this happens a lot, 500,000 zlotys, which is 120,000 euros, or even 250,000 euros to be covered by the newspaper or by other media. And of course, the main rationale behind it is to make sure that no articles like that are created later on, right? After you spend so much time in courts and you spend so much time on legal fees, even if you win, this actually detracts your resources from doing journalistic works. It wastes journalists' time, and they have to be in court instead of following leads, and so on and so forth. There has been approximately, we don't have the full data, but at least 150 such lawsuits over the last 6 years, probably closer to 200. Gazeta Wyborcza itself faced around, we get them every week, so it's probably around 80 right now. There's actually a database that we created that kind of tracks all of them. We win most of them. Actually, we lost very few of those lawsuits, but it's still a huge cost on the company and our time, and so on and so forth. Part of the reason why media are being sued all the time, in terms of how government is trying to explain that to the general public, is that those are what we call independent media are in fact not Polish media, but Polish-speaking media that are allegedly serving interests of others. So during the aforementioned presidential campaign, a common theme was accusing those media that have some sort of foreign ownership of actually serving the interests of that given country, most notably Germany. So the incumbent president and now re-elected president, Andrzej Duda, during the campaign said that a kind of tabloid daily called Fact was participating in a German attack during the election. And then he warned that Germany will not be picking the new Polish president. So you can see how that creates a certain atmosphere of actually, our media, the good media, the government media, we are protecting democracy and we're protecting Polish interests, whereas those other media, those media that call themselves democratic are in fact just foreign agents, kind of bringing foreign agenda that does not have Polish interests at heart. And after the election, the leader of the governing party, and right now Deputy Prime Minister Jarosław Kaczyński, also stated that his party's victory in the presidential elections was achieved despite a tough campaign in which all the rules were broken, and there was a coordinated assault by a powerful media front inspired from outside, and that basically everyone was ganging up on them. So for any kind of Polish, for any Polish media expert, that is absurd, because literally the government controls the public broadcaster that's hugely popular, and then one of the other largest commercial TV stations is trying to stay partial because its ownership structure is such that they have a lot of interest that involves the government. And yet that's the kind of narrative that's being peddled all the time, and that's being used to actually try to take over those media, which happened later on. Polish state-owned oil giant in late last year in December bought Polska Press, which is the owner of 20 out of 24 Polish local newspapers. So which they have approximately 18 million users online, and they control, as I said, vast majority of Polish local media sector, which is very important from the point of view of democracy, because local government is actually one of few state institutions that are not fully controlled by the current government, especially actually not nearly, all of the big cities and all of the even mid-sized cities are being governed by the opposition. Only small cities and rural areas are governed by the ruling camp. And this is a constant thorn in the side of the government, which tries to cut funding for local government through all measures possible. And now, by controlling media in this area, and controlling the financial, to a large extent, actually financial conditions of the local governments, we can easily imagine how they will try to use media to kind of to explain or to manipulate the local constituencies that, you know, the opposition mayor of your city is actually a crook, and look how he's not spending any money, he doesn't have any money, that's because he's probably stealing it and so on. That is, you know, there are no investments. That is why you need the local media, and that is why actually local media was considered by the government as more important than the, you know, the big ticket names such as Gazeta Wyborcza, which they use slaps on, but they don't necessarily need to purchase Gazeta Wyborcza, right? They can, it's actually like Trump was using New York Times as, well, yeah, this is the crooked media, they're out there to get us, and we have to, you know, this is kind of a rallying, or even this is good for your base, you can show them the enemy. On the local level, people actually search for information much more than politics, you know, local media about your sewers, your schools, your roads. And this is where you write that, well, the roads are broken because the mayor from opposition is not doing his job. The schools are horrible because the mayor from the opposition is not doing his job, and so on and so forth. And then, you know, essentially taking over the last kind of executive institution in Poland currently governed by the opposition. Now, that doesn't mean that media in Poland do not play any positive role in defending democracy. First of all, as I said, all those lawsuits that are being brought against articles that are trying to show the extent of abuse by the government or by the state-owned companies. And so the media is still playing a very important role in terms of informing Poles about the government's, as I said, abuses. But also the independent media are supporting bottom-up activities and are supporting protests by making them more vocal and by making sure that any sort of government activities aimed at silencing protesters were not going to disappear from the public's eye. So during last year's pro-abortion or pro-choice protests that kind of took sway all across Poland, a lot of very young activists were being harassed by governments or by school superintendents, by kind of the whole state apparatus, including police. They would be threatened with expulsions from school or even arrest. And that often included, 14-year-olds who would just post on Facebook, well, there's a protest in my tiny city. I'm going to go. If you want to go, you should join. And then, 2 days later, police knocks on this door of a 14-year-old and tries to bully him. And independent media in Poland was reporting on that very comprehensively to kind of make sure that no one feels alone, that no one feels like, okay, well, yes, I was protesting, but then now no one even remembers who I am, and now I'm being harassed, and I have to face that on my own. So media, including Gazeta Wyborcza, but not only, were playing a very important role in kind of bringing those cases to public, and that kind of happens every single time we have protests. Last summer there were huge pro-LGBT protests, harassed, and often police would use violence, and then every single case of abuse is being covered by the media, which I think plays a very important role in kind of encouraging people to exercise their civic rights and so on. Another example was early this year when the government proposed a new tax on media that would target, I don't want to go into technical details, but would necessarily target mostly private and independent media. And then in a sign of solidarity, all media outlets in Poland, or almost all, of course not the public broadcasters, would stop working for a day. There would be black covers, black screens on TV, and even those media that actually would not be harmed by this new law were also participating, showing that it's not only about business, it's not only about making money, but actually media play a very important role in defending freedom of speech and defending democracy, and can actually, with some coordination, show solidarity. I just want to end on a brief note about the EU and the European demos, and that part I mentioned a little bit, how the anti-German sentiments are being played or kind of played up by the government. I took the liberty of looking, I actually will try to share my screen with you because I think there's no way I can give justice to what I'm trying to show you. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Can we do something about it?
Yeah, we're looking into it. Simon, can you make sure that Milos can share his screen? And otherwise you can, I think Simon is working on it, and maybe in the meantime you can start your
right. So I
explanation.
just wanted to show you the covers of pro-government or government-sponsored weeklies from just the. I chose 5 from the last 6 months or less, actually, probably 5 months, that give you a good sense of how the EU is depicted by the government side. But I really, this is more as a curiosity and just to show you how well, their graphic designers are doing a marvelous and very inspiring work. I think we don't really need that to understand that obviously the media which are sponsored or helped, supported by the government are extremely anti-European. Of course, the other side, the independent media, such as Gustav Borcha, we like to think that we're very pro-European, right? We like to think that, well, we are doing everything we can to build this European demos and the sense of European citizenship. Here is where I would want to offer a word of caution. I believe that just as in every other EU member states, even the liberal center pro-European media, both newspapers and TV stations, are falling prey very often to this kind of false objectivity that tries to present both sides or latches on to those, very popular cliches about, well, Brussels, okay, of course, it's not very democratic. We are pro-EU, there are many advantages. It's great that the borders are open and the economy, that's supporting us a lot. At the same time, there is a problem with democracy in Brussels, and it's so bureaucratic and so on. And many of those are just lazy cliches, and I think we all use them, and media in particular. And I kind of have this pet peeve where I reading Polish media on the liberal side, and I find those very often. So one thing that needs to be done on the side of media is not to repeat the mistakes of British media, that even BBC, the supposedly completely impartial public broadcaster, would give as much screen time, or actually much more screen time, to the Eurosceptics than to Euro enthusiasts. Another thing that you can see very often is that, okay, well, let's talk about this European initiative on, let's say, investment or sharing of tax resources. And there's going to be nine economic experts who's going to say that's a great idea, but they're always going to give floor to those 2 who are extremely Eurosceptic and who's going to say, well, actually, it's a bad idea. And it's very difficult for people who have no economic expertise and no economic background to actually tell them apart. So that's a risk that I've seen over and over again in terms of British media, and I think in Poland we are facing the same problem. I see that there's
yeah,
raised, and actually that was my last remark. Unless we can share the screen, then I can just show you the covers.
I think share screening is allowed in the meantime. So if you can find it, you can show it.
Yeah. This is just as I said, because it's frankly it's outstanding. Can you see it?
Yes.
Right. We have, first one is basically Soros presented as the king of the EU, and it says that all commissioners are basically on his payroll. The second one is the leader of Polish opposition bowing to Angela Merkel. The third one is Donald Tusk, Merkel, and Macron kind of dressed up as thieves, and the headline is, "They will steal our money and they will force us to pay their debt." This is about the rescue and recovery package, the coronavirus, that Poland will benefit immensely, and Poland will actually not only receive grants, but also will be able to borrow on a much better condition than usually. And yet the cover was, well, they're going to steal your money, and we will have to pay their debts, meaning, I don't know, Poland will pay Germany's debts or Dutch, that's kind of absolutely ridiculous. And then there's 2021, Poland kind of facing, on the one hand, the US threat, and on the other hand, the EU threat, which, several years ago, would be completely absurd. And even more so, even in the same media in Do Rzeczy, a year ago they would have Trump on the cover every single time, and US was our strategic great ally and defender of democracy. Now with Biden, all of a sudden they're Marxist revolutionaries that we have to stay away from. And then the last one is von der Leyen and Kaczynski. Polexit, as you can see, it says we actually have the right to speak about Polexit, and the reason is LGBT and women's rights that they're trying to impose on us, those cultural Marxist categories. And so, yeah, it's an uphill battle, I think, especially with the EU. In Poland, EU remains very popular, but this is, as I said, this is just from the last 5 months. And that's every single, and the other half was anti-American, or anti-LGBT, so I only took the European ones. Right, so that's it in terms of my point, and I think I stopped sharing, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Milos. And it was great that you could share your photos, because I think it was really interesting. And thank you so much for your keynote and contribution. And I saw a hand raised already in the middle of your keynote. So I wanted to ask Reka to pose her question before we go to Yuri. Reka, I think you're still muted.
Yeah, I'm struggling to lower my hand with my computer heating up because it's scorching here in Budapest. So I guess it's
Reka,
not.
Sorry, just before you begin, I forgot to ask you. Maybe it's good if you quickly say who you are and where you're from, so everyone knows who you are.
So I'm Reka Kinga-Pap. I'm now speaking from Budapest, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Vienna-based online magazine Eurozine. So I'm sort of pendling between two very close but politically very distant points within Europe. And I only wanted to reflect on how the idea of the European demos is very painfully lacking also in these stories. So everything that Milos talks about is something I recognize word by word from a political script that, as a journalist and formerly as an activist working in Hungary, I have faced or faced down with, right? So buying up local newspapers and recognizing the impact and the importance of more intimate circles of publicity, for instance. These muzzle lawsuits, strategic lawsuits, slap suits against media, and all of these, including the often very obviously anti-Semitic, defamatory sort of communication, which I have the billboard campaign with Jean-Claude Juncker and George Soros on it. If you can recall, hopefully if my computer cools down, I can just post the link. I'm not going to share it because this is exactly what you expect. So my point here is that these are word by word the same things. More curiously, these strategies are word by, including voter suppression and rewriting election laws. So translate into super majorities.
Reka, can you repeat the last sentence? Because I didn't hear it.
Yeah, just give me a second. I'll try and close some more windows, hoping that helps. So included in this strategy is voter suppression of all sorts, also tailoring election laws so that a minority of the votes translate into actual supermajorities, and paralyzing electorates and the whole electoral system. Now, these are all direct imports. There's no creativity. There's no original idea in there. And I'm not being a modernist here. So I'm not like, it's not chic. What I'm saying is that these are all very easily recognizable. These are all the same pattern. People are picking the same fights. And while opposition and the demos, the local demos, is being kept in motion with these constant daily battles, they don't really fight any kind of joint fight. They don't even have a joint narrative, even though had we had a European demos that has a better understanding of each other's affairs, it would probably also be easier to react to threats to democracy And it would also be much more effective to clamp down on attempts like these. So there's a reason why, for instance, the European People's Party never actually ousted Fidesz when it still had a could have had a meaningful effect. And that is because there is no unified pressure that could be applied on a European level. So here I'm just trying to make an argument for maybe keeping out an ear for our neighbors more than we usually do. I know Hungarian media is spectacularly horrible at it. Like the neighborhood doesn't even exist or barely exists in our coverages. I think it would do us a lot of good if our international attention was a little bit more dedicated and we relied less on the stereotypes of our audience not wanting to hear about foreign people. I don't even believe that's actually true.
Yeah, thank you so much, Reka, for sharing this. And it's indeed not something that happens only in Poland. And there's of course a lot of parallels. And I think it's really interesting that you say that we should keep an ear out for our neighbors' affairs in media as well. Yuri, I wanted to ask you, you prepared a reflection to Milo's statement as well. Can you share your thoughts with us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Annemarijn. I think Annemarijn already mentioned I'm the director of the Bali and founder of and curator of the Forum on European Culture. We had the third one in September, and this third Civic Council is one of the ways in which the forum tries to talk about European culture. So it's wonderful to have you. Thank you very much, Milos, for your I think I should say, for your wonderful introduction. Very worrying, of course, and some of it is by now sort of really known. I just want to pose a few reflections on the threats you're describing to us. I'm also the chair of a media-owning company foundation in Holland. So I've given this ample thought, and I've been teaching sort of nationalism and the origins of nationalism and the idea of Europe at the University of Oxford for a few years, a long time ago already, but it fits in very well. I mean, if you consider the fact that a free democracy, a society under the rule of law, an open society, has three prerogatives to my idea, who are crucial to it. And take out one of them, and actually the free society, the open society crumbles. I would say it's free. It's obviously free elections. It's an independent judiciary. It's the monopoly of power done by the state. And it's the fourth one, of course, it's free press. And the fourth one is often forgotten, although it's the most vulnerable of those four pillars, because if we look at what Erdogan did, if we look at what Orban did, if we look at what's happening in Poland, or Putin did, if we look at the ways Trump tried to do it, if you remove the fourth pillar, the free press, you will end up with an unfree society, and you will end the rule of law. Of course, they're interconnected, all of them, but I think it's done on purpose, because it's still more difficult, because the state monopoly on power, you have to use the army. And in most sort of half democracies or democracies, it's still more difficult to use the army than to get the press under control. And that has to do, of course, with the ownership of the press. That has to do with the less and less independent judiciary, which you can have all sorts of lawsuits, like Miłosz just pointed out, very worrisome, 180 lawsuits and counting. And if you look at what actually happened in the sort of developments in Europe and the near abroad, Russia and Turkey, it is the most easy way. So I think we are mistaken to not give much more attention, if we talk about the European demos and European democracy, about the attention paid to the aspect of press and the market in which press has to operate and the state systems in which it has to operate. And we always thought that a state broadcaster would be a reassurance against those totalitarian tendencies, but it's not. And we could have seen that already with Berlusconi, who used the RAI to propagate his re-elections all the time, although he was a media tycoon and mogul, so but he could easily take 90% of the press coverage, combining his own networks and the networks of the RAI, the state-owned. So state ownership is not a complete security against for freedom of the press. So we have to look at other things. And I think we have to really look at the ownership of independent medias. And there we run up against a problem, because I've been up until this month the chair of the Soros Foundations in Europe. I think we do wonderful work, but if a rich owner or a rich foreign owner owns your media, you will have a problem, which is, I'm not against it, of course. I think the foundations are doing great work, but it gives a intellectual problem and a practical problem. That it is true that some rich men or rich people from outside are actually, so we have to look for ownership by media, by their readers, and look for audiences which want to buy it. So indeed, the market, has a real role to play in order to have a basis on which you can found a democratic and democratically owned readership. So a model of readers owning it, I think that's very important. It's not very easy. There's been, people have been trying to do it in Holland with the Correspondent, for instance. Very interesting experience. It's not very easy, but from a theoretical point of view, it might be the way forward for a democratic problem and legitimization problem. And then there's the other aspect, of course, of the European space for debate and press. And I think we have to take very serious by now that if the EU doesn't introduce policies and ways and funding for a pan-European culture, a pan-European press and press space, it will actually enhance nationalistic tendencies within the European Union, like you so eloquently showed, Miłosz, with your covers. So it will, if we don't face the reality that if Europe stays a more or less economic endeavor, it will actually reinforce nationalist sentiments within the member states on the cultural level and on the freedom of press level. So we have to face the fact that the European Union needs to speed up and needs to really realize that it needs to have policies and funding for a European space in the press. I think that's what actually your very eloquent talk, Miłosz, showed again, I would say. So these are just a few reflections. I don't think these are real answers to it, but I'm really excited by what you just showed us, though I'm really, really depressed with it as well, of course. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you, Yuri and Milos. I was curious, maybe you would like to react to this, because Yuri posed some ideas and suggestions. What do you think if you're listening to this?
Yeah, no, I am. I am listening to this. I obviously agree that I actually know. I think there's a certain irony in the fact that Yuri first said that state-owned media are not a solution on a national level, but then we kind of at the end we arrived at this. Okay, there should be a European kind of state-owned, right? Which I agree with both statements, but there is a contradiction, right? In a way, which doesn't necessarily make it bad, especially since we tend to believe that EU, because it's a federation, well, not federation, one day maybe, because it's a joint project by so many different states and society, we tend to believe that it is more benevolent, right? European values are hardly exclusive or excluding. I mean, of course, in practice, we can definitely see the Fortress Europe and kind of the anti-immigration push being both horrific and very very visible. That being said, Europe per se doesn't really look to dominate its neighbors. That rather looks to integrate its neighbors whenever possible. Although, of course, we have a big problem with enlargement fatigue. And so there is a distinction that's very important, I think, between state media and a kind of pan-European media. Also, because within this kind of pan-European media, I would imagine that we would have people from different member states in the board of directors or supervisors or whatever. I cannot imagine this being any other way, because with the EU, of course, we have to be as inclusive as possible. Otherwise, politicians at the council will never allow it. But I do believe that this is an absolute priority, and there's no way around it. And especially since, as you said, economic integration will only breed more nationalism, which in itself will defeat the purpose of economic integration, because those voices kind of pushing for dismantling of the EU will only get stronger. And we see that in Italy right now, just to take one example, where we thought that Lega was bad and we thought that Salvini is bad, and now there is a party that has 22% in polls that is on the right of Salvini, and all of a sudden Salvini looks like a moderate, and that shift is very visible in a lot of large member states that we usually consider to be core member states. France is another example that comes to mind. The Republicans are coming back, but those are not the same, those are not the Gaullist center right. This is a very much more kind of influenced by Marine Le Pen, right to far right. So of course that means that with a political scene right now, who can actually make the call and who can agree on having a pan-European television if the member states are governed by politicians I just mentioned. So we're kind of back to square one, with maybe Commission having some leeway. As always, Commission has always some kind of liminal margin to increase those spending. So I think to the extent that Commission can act unilaterally, this is the way to go. That, of course, that will not be enough to create a pan-European, vibrant media scene. That's
just to explain. I agree with you that it might be there might be a paradox, saying that state-owned media are not, but the EU needs to play a role. Not necessarily. The EU not necessarily has to have state or EU-owned media. Battling the big American tech companies, allowing the European media to actually make a living by and implementing those sort of measures because of reasons safeguarding democracy and entrance of the population to free press and media. So it not necessarily means a EU media, but it needs the attention from the European Union, for instance, by battling the American tech companies and allowing European media to make a living. And so there's more to it than just state-owned EU media, of course. It's the attention paid by Brussels to the importance of a European policy on media.
Yeah, right. Right now, the only actual European media that is being read throughout Brussels and the whole of the EU, of course, I mean, Eurozine is a great medium as well, but the most popular one is actually American, right? Politico, who entered the scene a couple of years ago and kind of became the #1 media on Europe. It's an American outlet.
Yeah, I think it's indeed really interesting to explore what the options are, because I think there are several options, and I totally understand, Milos, what you're saying about this pan-European media, but I think it's also good to look at what the other options are and supporting national or local media and make sure that they can do their work. I'm also curious to hear from the others. Is there anyone who wants to react to this specific point of what the EU should do in order to safeguard free press in Europe?
Well, if I can jump in for a moment, I'm not going to take too much time, just to use the occasion to thank you so much for organizing this event, and we're so happy as Gazeta Wyborcza to be your partner. I'm Susanna Lewandowska. I represent Gazeta Wyborcza Philanthropies, which runs the philanthropic endeavors of Gazeta Wyborcza as a newspaper carrying a social responsibility, but also we exist, and here I come to the point. We were founded in 2018 specifically to build another leg of financial support for the newspaper. And we are very happy to see that the European Commission has launched a significant amount of funding to be available soon to come to media organizations across the European Union. And this is great, going back to, funding versus agglomerating businesses, which I think it's rather impossible to do for the current European Union as we see it today. But the other thing that I have in mind, looking at the work that we do, because the work the Gazeta Wyborcza Philanthropies does internationally is to raise the voice on behalf of Gazeta Wyborcza, on behalf of our readers, and on behalf of free Polish society as we believe we see it, to other international organizations. Gazeta Wyborcza is part of LENA, which is the leading European newspaper alliance, together with some largest newspapers in across Europe. We have also launched support campaigns through our befriended Dagens Nyheter, the Swedish daily, and we are also raising voice to promote our cause work internationally, transatlantically, beyond European Union. But my question is, and this is an open question that I personally don't have an answer to, what happens if a newspaper is in trouble? And let's keep in mind, Gazeta Wyborcza is actually business-wise doing very well, but from other political implications of our work, we may not do so well soon in the near future. So what happens? And I then go back to Reika's mentions about countries where free media are under jeopardy. So what kind of support should be handy for such media outlets that are in trouble, and what kind of international support they should gain from the part of European Union? Because this is something that we as philanthropies, as Gazeta Wyborcza, actually don't see. We raise support through our collaborations, through our networks, but it's very hard to get such a strong support from the part of the European Union as a commission, as the institution that guides us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susanna. So I'm also curious to hear maybe your first ideas on this. What do you think is necessary in this case, or would be helpful?
Well, I think it would be very helpful for European institutions to be more actively involved on the go, but we have to measure our frontiers of what kind of implications it would have for free media and independent journalism, of course, because it's a very sensitive issue. But I believe that European Union should not only be a passive observer. For sure. If you ask me about what kind of body it should be promoted to hold such a position and to serve such a role, it is my question that I ask myself at this moment.
Thank you. I see Sylvia. Would you like to react to this? And would that also be the right moment to start with your reflection, maybe? Maybe we can combine those two things.
Sure. Let me just start with answering those questions. I want to introduce you maybe to some good idea on the local, national level. Actually, what we did with the NGOs is taking care of independence of judiciary. So the one with judges, with independent prosecutors, with other activists. What we did, we established a Justice Defense Committee. It's not actually formal entity. It's just a combination of 13 NGOs. Very different. Well, we do have the common aim, but we are very different. But we meet every single week. Either before COVID, it was just in person, and we discuss what is going on in our field. How can we help? Who is in trouble? Like who, about new disciplinary proceedings against judges. In your case, it may be about new slap proceedings against one of the journalists, or a situation in a certain newspaper. It works very well. We meet every week. We work very hard. We do conferences together. We do statements, and we are together, and we are stronger. And this is really something I would recommend you. It may be difficult in the very beginning because all different entities and with all different ideas. It can be really dynamic and in the very beginning, but it really works. And just an idea answering to your question.
And would you recommend this on a national level, Sylvia, or on a European level?
Well, I think both. I mean, in national level, it may be easier because, you know, you all know each other. And to establish that, as I said, this is not a formal entity. So it's much easier. So on the national level, what we do, we do cooperate a lot with NGOs from all over Europe. And speaking of the European Union, we do travel a lot to Brussels, meeting with MPs, explaining them situation of judges in Poland. And it works very well because we go there, that's our institutions, right? So they want to listen to us. And, in case of independence of judiciary, it's kind of easier because, it's a common system. So we tell about that and we say, okay, this is our common case. We have to react together. Otherwise, everything will be destroyed. With media, it's of course also the same, but not that obvious, right? Because, with the different regulations. But we do cooperate with NGOs from all over Europe. They do statements to defend judges. It's really important for those judges, believe me. For them, it's something really important to know the judges in Holland, and in I don't know, Great Britain, they stood for them. That's really crucial because they're in really difficult situation.
Yeah, I saw a hand raised by Calypso Nikolaidis. Calypso, do you want to touch upon this specific point?
Hello everyone. Hello, Aunt Martin. I always super enjoy our conversations, and I understand that Sylvia was going to speak anyway to give her address now. So as you said, Anne-Marie, so I'd rather listen to her story, which is so important, and then I'll comment.
Great. I just wanted to check with you if it's an urgent question now or whether we could wait.
Right.
So Sylvia, can I ask you to give us your view on what Milos just said?
Sure. Let me start with the statement. That's, for me, it's an obvious statement, but I just feel that's now the time and the place to say that. Those very brave judges, those activists, fighting for democracy, fighting for rule of law for so many years now, they wouldn't survive without your help and support. They will be destroyed by national hate speech, media, by propaganda and hate speech given, by the national media. They wouldn't survive without your presence at our conferences, at courts. That's really crucial for them. Your attention, the thing that you place some, thing in your agenda that they sometimes it's only thing that we have left because, the legal system is so much infected and destroyed that you cannot use legal tools anymore. I was, taught, during my at the university that there are certain legal actions against certain, legal actions, right? And I can, now I cannot use it anymore because there is a wall and it's just, not working. And attention given by media and the thing that I can, describe the story, in Gazeta Wyborcza and another newspaper, and that any judge can actually say about his or her disciplinary proceedings. It's so important for them. So I really want to thank you for that. You're a great friend and the best ally that we can actually imagine. So that's I wanted to say in the very beginning. And another reflection from yesterday. I was in Gliwice. It's a city in Warsaw, and we do travel a lot in Poland, visiting small cities, villages, with a program called Tour de Constitution. So the aim of this program is to talk with citizens about human rights, about constitution, about principles, about values. And I can always tell, if in this particular city or village they listen only to national media. It's just very obvious. But I'm saying that because we cannot forget about those regions, those areas. It's opening dialogue with them. It's really crucial. And when you asked about ideas, firstly I thought, okay, this is my dream. I dream about writing to local, newspapers about independence of judiciary. I think it's just, the best way to sell this this idea to the people. But then I thought, oh my God, now it's not almost possible anymore because of a media press and all this what happened. So, but before that, I just thought that this is really crucial, and I dream that lawyers in cities and villages, they just have access to this local media, television or local newspapers, and actually open dialogue with the citizens there. That's really something very important for me, because once you go to these regions, to these cities, you can have a different perspective, and you can touch actually their problems and see why they react, why they, for example, they don't care about independence of judiciary, or and probably they don't understand why free media are crucial for their life. I think they just don't understand this concept. And what I think that should be done, it's a campaign, actually explaining to citizens that you're not fighting for your jobs. You're not fighting, for some abstract idea. This is for you. I mean, without us, it's just dark world. I mean, you did that very great with the media protest recently. So I think it's really crucial. What I also wanted to add to Milo's statement, it's what strikes me the most as a lawyer is that the government is really using the institutions specified in Constitution to destroy free media. Look at the National Broadcasting Council, right? It should be, protecting freedom of speech. It does exactly the opposite. Constitutional Tribunal, this act imposing taxes on media. There is no chance that if in my opinion, it of course is against values and freedoms described in the Constitution, like freedom of speech, like freedom of press. And if it goes to the Constitutional Tribunal, there's no chance that those people there would actually protect free media. They would do exactly right, the opposite. So there is no protection from that side anymore. Extraordinary Chamber and Public Affairs of the Supreme Court. That's also a new chamber that was created also for the purpose to destroy free media, because every license, every concession finally ends at the Extraordinary Chamber, which is totally controlled by politicians. And scenario from Hungary is really realistic, because they have also this chamber. So this is what strikes me the most as a lawyer, that they use those institutions and the system is closed. It's so much infected. There's nothing you can do in the system. You can only rely on independent journalists, which needs help and support. Sometimes it's financial support, psychological support. This is what we do with the judges. Sometimes, usually, it's the message that they're not alone. We send those messages to judges in small towns, because I believe that it's much easier to fight in Gazeta Wyborcza in Warsaw for independence of judiciary than be an independent journalist in some small city in Poland. There, it's really difficult with credits, with all those people around you. So they do need support, and you can rely only on them and on citizens that will stood for free media, and of course on free and independent judges. Look what happened with Polska Press. I mean, it's not effective, as you see, because the system is broken. But and one more thing about you showed all those covers. It's really important for me to know that we should more often strike back. So what Ordo Juris does, what other NGOs, Reduta Dobrego Imienia does, they sue every journalist. They they're not afraid of that, right? They do it a lot to create a chilling effect. I think we should do it more often. You shouldn't think, well, it's not worth it. It's, maybe it's worth it, because if they will get so many, lawsuits or so many actions, or at least a half of it, it may actually work. I mean, this is something that I'm missing now with the thinking of lawyers also, and also of journalists.
Sophia, just to ask you, what I didn't hear the point that you were making about, and you said we should do this more often, but what should we do more often?
Well, we should take legal actions against them, like we did, with Gazeta Polska and stickers LGBT-free zones. What we did, we just wrote over weekend a motion to the court, and the court said, you cannot do this. You cannot release those stickers. And of course they did, but for LGBT society, it was so crucial that actually someone did it. And the court, said, okay, this is not right in Poland. And for them, it was crucial. So also from that point of view, legal actions, and we, there are army of lawyers that can actually help you to do so, or to discuss. So I believe we don't do it that often that we should.
Yeah, thank you so much. Susanna, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to follow up that just to clarify, Sylvia did that perfectly, but just from our side that Sylvia's suggestion is important, because it says that once, Gazeta Wyborcza has about 80 lawsuits brought against Wyborcza, in particular journalists, etc. So Sylvia, as I understand, is suggesting that the Gazeta Wyborcza should sue back, and that there are lawyers who are willing to help perpetuate that. So interesting.
Not only Gazeta Wyborcza,
but only Gazeta Wyborcza. I'm just speaking.
With society and activists and all other NGOs, it shouldn't just tolerate all those covers, right? I mean, sometimes there are no grounds, but sometimes we just let it go. Meanwhile, you're getting 18 lawsuits, right? So I think that it should be done more often.
Yeah, thank you so much. Alicia Gushinska, maybe you can start with a brief introduction of yourself.
Yes, I'm happy to do so. Hello, everyone. My name is Alicja Gąścińska. As you can hear, Polish name, Polish born, but actually Belgian raised. I'm an academic. I teach in the University of Buckingham in the UK, though I'm Belgian based, still novelist, writer, philosopher, writing for several media. Voila, I think that's my summary. Thank you, all of you, for your contributions. Of course, the situation in Poland is very dear to me, and I follow it up. And I'm in a slightly different position than most people here, because most of you are based in Poland, and writing, voicing the problems that Poland has. I here in Belgium, on the other side, I very often tend to defend Poland, that it's not as bad as people think in Poland, because very quickly Poles are seen as backward people, not knowing or understanding the values of democracy. And then I have to say that, yes, they do. They are on the streets. Yes, they fight back, and so on. Now, we are not only today we are not coming together just to show the problems, but we want to think about the solutions, which is the difficult thing, because I think most of us here around the virtual table know what the problems are, but how to solve it, or what would be a good way forward. And I fully agree with what Yuri has said, that free press, freedom of speech and free press is the fourth pillar of an open society, of the democracy. It's the fourth pillar of a healthy European Union. And do they do enough? Do they see the problems enough? Do they support people in Poland in this case enough? And I think we all know that I think Poles might feel in that sense a bit abandoned and left to themselves, solve your problems. And I think the problem is also there, that you can't leave this to the Poles alone and think, well, the Poles have a bad press, bad for them. Lucky we Dutch people or Belgians, or we can move forward with our lives. I think this is a tension, and it's a tension, and I bring it up because Sylvia has talked about on the judiciary and the problems there, and it's similar because I think other countries didn't react enough. European Union didn't react enough. We just left the Poles solve your problems. And a month ago or so, Adam Bodnar has received a prize, an amnesty chair from the University of Ghent, my alma mater, and I was there to talk with Adam Bodnar. And Adam Bodnar is the Polish ombudsman who worked 5 years defending a lot of judges. And we also talked about how to solve the problem. What should the EU do? Should they do a policy? Should they come together? And this is always a problem with the European Union because they are quite impotent when it comes to that. They have to agree, and it takes time. And as you said, Yuri, they have to hurry up, but we all know this won't be a thing that they will do. So what can they do? And Adam Bodnar then said, well, actually, I think that it would be great if, for example, van der Leyen, we don't need a policy, but if van der Leyen would just symbolically go for a coffee to one of those judges, that would be a sign. And I thought, yes, actually, why always immediately think that things need to be written in policies? Why not more of those, it might seem symbolic, but powerful things that would show there is a problem there, and we do care about the Poles, and we do care what is happening, and maybe we can't solve it immediately, but we see you, we see what you are doing, and so I think I would encourage, in a way, those more symbolic maneuvers from the EU, but also from us. And I'm talking about the Netherlands and Belgium, and how can we from here show that they are seen and that we see it. And this brings me to another thought. I'm also a member of PEN Flanders, PEN that, you know, the imprisoned writers are around the world, and we try to organize a lot of things for them to show the problems they are. But actually we could show the problems within the European borders already, and talk more about it, so that I think Poles would feel less abandoned. So I'm not sure about suing back, if that's the best strategy. It will be a lot of money, a lot of effort, and then you're just maybe doing the same thing, and then they will say to you, well, you do it as well, so why couldn't we? And then you're suing except of doing journalism. I'm not against it, but I'm not sure if this is the best way forward. Also, a small thing that Miłosz also said, that you said that the press, the free press, or the Wyborcza, Gazeta Wyborcza and other, should not repeat maybe the cliches about the EU that are negative. Again, I'm not sure if that's also the best way forward, to only talk about the good things about the EU, because there are bad things about EU, like they are impotent, like they are do not hurry up, like they don't voice things enough, like they don't solve certain things. So, and I think this gives the balance, that you're not just praising the EU. No, you're still a critical journalist. EU is not, you know, a holy cow. It makes mistakes, but it's the best thing ever. As democracy is the best thing ever. Although, you know, we constantly fight, but what is the alternative? So, okay, again, I don't give a solution to it, but I just had to think about Adam Bodnar, and maybe if we wait till the EU will come up with this policy, then we can wait another 10 years, and maybe we have to think more, how can we from outside of Poland help Poland? How can we voice it? How can we, you know, so that they are not left alone?
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia. I think this is indeed a really good added comment to the discussion we had. I see two hands actually. Bassem, would you like to start? And then Milos, and then Calypso, and then maybe we should have a small break before we go to the second session of today. But Bassem. first.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bassem Akiki. I'm in Poland now. I'm in Warsaw, but I'm originally come from Lebanon. So that's an important information, as I know democracy in Lebanon. I know democracy in Poland, in Europe. So maybe I will speak later on because I will have a comment for the culture, because I'm a conductor, so I'm more into art and culture, not into politics. But it's very interesting what's happening here. Thank you very much, Sylvia, for your speech, for your comment, because it was so clear. There are many, as I figure out, you're a lawyer, and no much lawyers, they speak such a language that I not can understand. Let's say. In a way, I want to say here just two things that I'm making notes, which is really very interesting, about the trap we are in at the moment. And it's so sad, as I said, I come from Lebanon, and what I'm watching in Poland, we are in a trap in Poland, and we are playing the game that they want us to play, and separating Poland from the European Union. As I notice that all the time we speak the European Union and the national media, but the national media are the media also of European Union, because European Union is Poland, is Hungary, is Belgium, is France, is every country here. So the thing is, our new government, which I have a very, let's say,
Bassem,
sad about that. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but maybe it's good if you just speak into the microphone of your laptop, because I'm not sure.
I'm here. You don't hear me well. Now it's better because I'm on headphones, so I don't know if it's okay.
Yeah, this is better. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear you very well, because it's really interesting what you say.
No, so it's like separating the European Union from the countries which are members of the European Union. And now, as I heard also, like before, what Yuri said, and about the fundings, which is very interesting, because the fundings are always the solution for everything. Let's be serious, because it's in the culture. If you don't have the funding, you cannot make a concert. It's the same with the press. It's the same with everything. But is it the funding from European unions? They should go to which press? In fact, that's the thing. If the European Union will choose that the funding will go to this or not to that, what is now the criterion for this? This is a very serious question, because the European Union as an institution, they will start to separate one press from the other. So let's say, for example, Gazeta Wyborcza, which is the organizer, it's one of the press, and for example, another one will not receive the funding because, for example, they are not thinking like the European Union, or for example, like the nationalists, as it is now in Poland. That it's very sad that the national media are not independent. I'm not speaking about freedom. I'm speaking about independency of the media. That's my first thought. But my second thought is, we think about the European Union, but they don't have the tools, in fact, to react. Because this is why, even with the judges, even with the judgment, even with the court, they can give suggestions. I don't have the language of juristic language, but they cannot give judgments like you should do that, Poland should do that. Poland will decide for itself, and I think this is a major problem in the European Union. We always wait for them to react. They make a reaction which is not a judgment, which is not you should do that and you have to do it. You can do it. It's a choice for a country. I'm not sure if I'm right. Please correct me about this. But as I see what's happening in Poland, for example, whatever comes from the European Union, even against what the government is doing, but the government is doing himself, and there's no consequences about what's happening, because the European Union cannot take these consequences. They cannot kick out Poland, for example, from the European Union, because it's impossible. It's not in Poland is the European Union. Hungary is the European Union. Mm-hmm. And I think we should start to speak, not to be in this trap, and to speak as European in here, and not as Polish against Europe or Europe against Poland.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much for your important comments, Bassem. I think it's also indeed a question about short-term things we can do and longer-term things we should do or could work towards in the future, maybe. Milos, I saw your hand first, and you wanted to react to Alicia, I think, and then we go to
Yeah, I actually have 2 points. One is a very short one. I absolutely agree that all media should criticize EU when warranted. What I meant is that there's an awful lot of false cliches about the EU that are just being repeated, very often used by politicians because it's super easy to just blame it on Brussels and say, well, we our hands are tied, and the media keep repeating that. Yeah, as I said, it's just my pet peeve because I saw all of it in the UK before, and I am all for criticizing the EU for its inaction or for some of its kind of baroque in infrastructure. However, when it's just a matter of lazy repeating of cliches that are ill-founded, I believe that we can do better and we should do better. And I also talk about even Gustave Borcha, as I said, sometimes there are articles that really bother me about that, but you see that everywhere actually. The second point is actually kind of coming back to what Sylvia was talking about, local press. And I think it kind of links nicely with what Yuri was talking about. We need more kind of European media. I think we first, in order to kind of save European integration, we actually first need local media. And it's kind of more because one of the problems right now with democratic deficit and with propaganda and fake news kind of spreading all around is actually the fact that local media disappeared in most European states and the United States as well, which makes it much more difficult for us to understand the world that actually surrounds us and to find explanations for, well, okay, why is my school overcrowded? Why is my street in terrible shape? Why is the hospital like that? And usually the answer that comes from populists is either, well, because immigrants, or because the EU, or very often because EU let in the immigrants, and that's why your school is horrible, and your cultural institution collapsed, and so on. And if you have local media that's independent and financially viable, then you actually understand what's going on around you. And we talk about Polska Press, the media conglomerate that was bought by Polish state-owned, Polish state-owned oil giant. Polska Press wasn't really perfect beforehand. It was owned by this German publishing group, Passauer Press, but very often, as is the problem for most local press, they were in cahoots or they were dependent on the local infrastructure, so on the local politicians or on the local big business. There's like a big company in the city and they cannot write against this company. So whenever there's a problem, they're just going to shift it somewhere else. And what we actually need is local journalists who are independent, not only from law and justice in Warsaw, but also from the local power structures, which is even more difficult. And I think this is where EU can play a role, because by providing grants to local journalism, which actually, Gustave Borcha, actually, our foundation received a grant from the European Parliament to boost our local. We have right now 28, I think, local editions in many
30.
Oh, it's 30 now. It's we're really amping up, and this is not to write about big politics. This is exactly to write about a judge in this relatively mid-sized city being harassed, or a student or an activist, or why is the sewer not working? And it's crucial, and I think this is much more achievable than trying to establish European media, and it also kind of takes the weapons away from populism, which then makes EU more viable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milos. We have a few more minutes left before we have to go to the second session. So Calypso and Gregors, I wanted to give you the opportunity, and Yuri as a final word, but maybe we can keep it a bit brief so we also have enough time for the other great speakers that will be part of the second session. Calypso.
Thanks, Anne-Marie and Yuri. And I mean, it's been fascinating, and I've spent a lot of time in Poland and worrying about what is going on there. And I just want to comment, you wanted us to introduce ourselves. So I've been teaching in Oxford for 21 years, but I've just moved to EUI. And my very last book is called A Citizen's Guide to the Rule of Law, the most precious human invention of all time. And in a way, that's part of what I just want to say, that you know, a lot of the story we want to tell here is about citizens' ownership of everything we're fighting for, media freedom, judiciary, etc. But that's easier said than done. And how do you do this? And one bit of that very big conversation, which I think was said very well by Sylvia, but also Miloš and Alicia, is that, I mean, Sylvia, when your thank you to others and your call for others, you, in a way, you were saying you know, our chill is your chill, and we should say your chill is my chill. If you sneeze, we cough. You know, that's what Europe should be about. And Bassem was really articulating it in a very cogent way. And let me put it in a bit kind of philosophical way, which is that, you know, when we speak about European space and European democracy, we always tend to think in vertical terms, appealing to Brussels. But I think that all of you, one way or another, have spoken about the horizontal, if I can put it that way, what I've always called for the horizontal revolution. But you really give it real consistency. So to the extent that we appeal to Brussels, to the vertical out there, up there, it's to empower and make more possible these horizontal network relations. And that's, you know, whether we are speaking about defending the rule of law and judges helping each other and citizens helping each other, or, you know, I'm part of Good Lobby Profs, and that's about academic profs, you know, helping each other and helping the judiciary in other countries, you know, the local media, the rule of law, all of that. But the philosophy, and there would be much more to say, also echoing Yuri. But I think it's very important to convey in our discourse and narratives to our citizens in our pushback that indeed Europe is about mutual recognition of each other from cities, from countries, from regions. That's the spirit of Europe. It's not out there in Brussels. And I say this as someone who fought hard against Brexit. And that it's this caring about each other. Now, and this is where the conversation between Miloš and Alicia is so important, because, you know, it's the usual thing. It's right versus right, and you're both right. And, you know, Miloš, yes, easy cliche, but I mean, I want to echo what Alicia was saying. I think we're going to lose, you know, a lot of people if we reproduce the binary. And you know, us versus them. Macron did it in a big way at the last European elections, creating this kind of big binary, the populists versus us. And I've been fighting all my life against this binary. And I think there are, and I know that's not what you're saying, Miloš, but you know, it's worth repeating again and again. And it's not only, I mean, it's what Alicia says, but it's not only, oh, the EU can be wrong. You know, there are structural issues in the EU, and I'm working a lot on the Conference on the Future of Europe and participatory democracy, etc. The sense that we are entitled to tell the people what is good for them is very Brussels. You know, the obsession with oneness. You know, the elitist empowerment is there. I mean, there's no two way around it. And so pushing against that and telling the story in more subtle ways is, of course, strategic, because there is a rallying around the flag that you were talking about, Miloš, that people do kind of say, well, yeah, you're just for Brussels, you're an outsider. And somehow the Polish government is heard, and peace is heard when it says that. So, you know, we want to be careful not to be, you know, against the flag. But it's also something that, and I'm going to finish that, Anne-Marie, it's also that we need to acknowledge as kind of intellectuals and writers that most people are ambivalent about everything in life. You know, if the kids are ambivalent about their parents, you know, love-hate relation, that's what the human condition is kind of all about. And it's normal that people be ambivalent about Europe. I always say cooperation or control. I want both in my life and in my country's life, my city's life. You know, I want both. And so you know, we need to find political processes and discourse, etc., that acknowledge and in fact empower that ambivalence. And say, I mean, I understand you've got these feelings, and what you know Sylvia is doing when you go to neighborhoods. It's amazing, Sylvia, what you're doing, where you go and speak to people, and of course you can't just suddenly tell them, hey, you know, Europe is great, we're one European people. You have to appeal with their concern. Am I still in control here in Poland, my little town? And yeah, you are, you know, and Brussels is not going to take it away, but you know, sometimes Brussels sounds like that, and I'm sure that's what you do, Sylvia, and that's the point. And I think that's what we should continue to do. So that's my little message.
Thank you. Thanks, Calypso, for bringing all these visions together, and I think it's really interesting. Gregors, I wanted to give you the words to see what you would like to add to the discussion.
I'm director of Warsaw, which has since 20 years program, international and local program. And thank you very much for all these thoughts I can share with you. But I'm very pessimistic about the future, in fact, and because we have many contacts with Hungarian artists before, and I see that I'm disappointed very much by European community. That's what I would say. I am a great believer. I was. But I am very disappointed, and many people in Poland feel it, and that is very important. That we in Poland we don't feel European, and we don't feel the values, European values we fight for in many years, and we don't feel that Brussels or other parliaments, European, they don't fight for the values of Europe in this country. And we used to the situation in Hungary for many years. Now we used to the situation in Poland, and each year in these countries is worse and worse. And each year it will be more difficult to come back to Europe. We out of Europe, just formally in Europe, because just we taking the money from Europe, and even this money are not really spread well. And we don't have the interest to the values of what we fight for. And I feel the very big support from the culture people. I feel in network, we exchange a lot, we travel a lot, we speak to the audience, we exchange, but I don't see the politicians from Europe in this country. I don't see those people will speak with this part of European nation. We need the values. We need somebody who will tell us that we're part of the Europe and that we will come back there. And I just come back freshly from Lithuania, and I was working there for 6 weeks in National Theatre. And during these 6 weeks, they start the same national movement. They start the same family march, like was in Poland, like 10 years ago. It's like the same starting there. So I think that that these changes could be for a very long time, and it could change the structure of Europe totally. And that's one thought. And the another thought, the last one, that's my private thought, that we as a Poles, we very much infected by Second War. The Second War, like I said in one of the pieces I directed, they're knocking to the door. All the time they're knocking to the door, and this third generation people really are frightened, and they really don't know where to go. And we need these strong voices. We need strong leaders, and we would like to get rid of this feeling and this frightenedness and obstruction, which is taking care what they're doing around us. So that's my statement. I just feel like that it's really getting worse and worse. Each month is worse and worse, and people are fighting. There are a lot of activists. There are a lot of great people, but it's each month we're losing the power, and we really far away from Europe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gregors, and Thank you so much for sharing this, because I think we are constantly looking at kind of solutions and recommendations we can make, but of course it's also really important to share this kind of pessimistic and maybe hopeless ideas that many people have as well. So thank you for sharing that. Yuri, I wanted to give the last word for this part of the session to you, and then we go to the next speaker.
Yeah, see this, yes. Just very briefly, I entirely agree with Bassem Makiki, that you need to be very careful not to make the mistake that you endow Brussels with a lot of money to distribute among journalists and journalism and the press. We need to be very careful here, because that was not what I'm just to elaborate a little bit. It's about a policy, a public policy and a public awareness that in the field of culture and press, there is a role for the union. Adding to what Calypso Nicolaides just said, enabling the horizontal cooperation between press, for instance, having the possibility for everybody to translate good journalism from one language into the other, just very practical, which we've been trying to propagate with the European Press Prize, which we established here at the Bali 7 years ago, to have the possibility to help each other, to have the horizontal, and there should be a policy and an awareness of policies and possibilities and responsibilities in Brussels for that. On the other hand, I would say in the cultural field, there is a need for public money spent by Brussels. And they cannot get away with saying, you know, that's only on a national level, because that will enhance a national and nationalistic culture in the end. So I would say paying musea or paying music or paying a pen, you know, there would be a role, a possibility for the union. But in press, I do agree, and just to elaborate a little bit, that was not as I proposed. I would think that there should be a pan-European approach, for instance, to the threat, I would say, from big tech, from Silicon Valley, making it impossible for European media to survive on their own. And they, you know, reaping the results of advertisements to the Cayman Islands instead of being reinvested into European journalism, the advertisement money from, for instance, Facebook. And there the union could play a big role.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yuri, for this clarification. I wanted to check whether there is someone who needs a very short break before we go to the second session. But if you don't feel that's necessary, we can also go along. Is there anyone who wants a break? Raise your hand. All right, yes. So I would like to give you 5 minutes just to get a quick coffee or something. And we really have a fantastic program ahead of you. So please be back in a few minutes and take your time. See you back. Hey, Alicia, how are you doing? You're still muted. I don't hear you.
Nu wel?
Ja. Hey.
Alles goed en met jou?
Heel goed. Ja, het is weer echt, it's again a really interesting conversation. I just switched to English because I see
fine.
Rika coming in. And yeah, I think it's just fantastic to have all these people together, and it's such a fruitful conversation. First, I thought 2.5 hours of Zoom meetings is really long, and now I'm like, we need more time, but we will.
No, I'm very pleased to be here, and as you know, it's a topic very close to my heart, and so every time that that I can have this connection with my first homeland, I'm very happy because it helps me to write better articles in the end as well.
Yeah, I can imagine, and it's a great source of inspiration, and it's interesting, I think, to have such different perspectives and views at the table.
Yeah, it always strikes me that when I talk with Poles, and I said it today, I have to approach things from a different angle, because when I'm in Belgium, then they only the news, and if they ask some comments from me, it's always about the mistakes the Poles make, you know, about the LGBT, and look, they are not tolerant, look, they don't understand democracy, and so I always have to push back and fight back. And I think that maybe there is a challenge for journalism, but more a challenge for journalism on our side in Belgium, because if we portray the Poles as always the ones who have homophobic ideas and those who don't understand democracy, well, then people will not care about that part of Europe, because they will say, well, they don't really belong in the spiritual sense to us. And so I think the coverage should be also different here. It's not that they cannot, you know, of course they have to cover the problems that are there, but they should do it maybe more from the courageous side, from all the women on the streets, from all, you know, people.
Yeah, also the positive stories, and the other story about Poland and the people fighting for free press, and
Why not saying that there was a foolish you know, politician that stood up and had an idea, but they fought back, and they're you know, and they something, so that Belgians and people from Dutch people would have the feeling that yes, we want them, they're part of us. And I think this division is made by always giving bad publicity, and it's not that it's true what they are saying, but it's showed from a wrong angle, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I'm just looking at, I only see the 4 of us, and I would actually love to start with the second part of this session. Yeah, I see you're ready, Basim is ready, Olga's ready. I'm also waiting for Simon Strauss, because he will reflect on, oh, look, I see, I just have to call out your name and then you will appear on the screen. That's amazing. I didn't know it worked like that. But I'm very much looking forward to the second part as well. I know Yuri is on his way as well, so let's just wait for him, and then we start with the second part. I hope Calypso is also still there, and Milos. Basim, did you want to ask something? I don't hear you. Yes? It's strange. You're not muted anymore, but I still don't hear you. It's a pity. Now it says.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, this is perfect, actually.
I took out the headphones because I wanted to say to Alicia, I totally agree with, because you know, I work a lot also in Brussels. I work at La Monnaie very often, and then whenever I come the first day, I have the same comments from the Belgian people about, oh, how poor you are living in Poland. It should be very, very hard for you there. And well, it's not true, because I'm surrounded by many wonderful friends, and it's, the vision of what the press is telling. And in a way, I understand also why it's like that, because you have from one side an extreme right press, and you need the extreme left to have the balance, and when somebody goes extreme, immediately the other part goes extreme. Is it right or wrong? I cannot judge this, but we're in a way, that's why I also said before about the independence of the press, not the freedom. It's not about being free or not, but like the freedom, a little bit, we can go further than we are supposed to go, where we are supposed to go, because when we cross some borders, and we are often doing this, and especially in these times, unfortunately, and well, it leads to such situation that you are extremely on this side or that side. So now Europe looks to Poland as a country from the Middle Ages, which is not true.
Yes, indeed. That's sadly very often the case, that Poles are seen as backward and from the Middle Ages, while they are very often ahead of other countries. And so here I am promoting Poland all the time and trying
Me too. So I will join you with that. Yeah.
All right, I think Yuri is almost there as well. I'm not sure if Calypso and Milos are still there, because otherwise it would be great if they could put on their cameras so we also know you're there. And also Reka, maybe? I'm not sure. Let's just start with the second part of the Civic Council on European Democracy, where we will speak about specifically the role of culture. So the first part focused on the role of the media in safeguarding democratic values, and the second part will be on the role of culture. And we have a great speaker who prepared a keynote for you. Her name is, sorry if I mispronounce your name, but I really do my best, Olga Brzezinska. She is the president of the City of Literature Foundation in Krakow, an initiator of many cultural projects and events, and also an academic teacher, Olga. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your story, which will focus on the role of culture in protecting democracy and creating a sense of a European demos.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, and thank you for having me. And I'm really, truly honored to be part of this important discussion. And we are discussing important things. We talked about the media and democracy, and now we're going to shift to arts and culture. Let me start with a very important statement that art matters because democracy matters. And here is why we're gathered today. Today, as illiberal populism is on the rise and political polarization impacts states and regions and local communities and even families, the struggle over democratic values has taken on a new urgency. Democracy has become extremely vulnerable. We are witnessing the rise of authoritarian regimes and the success of populist parties in Europe and beyond, trends which weaken social cohesion and challenge democratic governance. Art and culture have a direct bearing on our capacity to make European demos and democracy resilient and can contribute to achieving this goal. Art plays a key role in modern society. A society that revolves around shared values and stories give people a sense of belonging and mutual recognition. Art also holds a mirror to this society and reflects reality in ways that foster a sense of understanding, telling a story of where we came from, who we are, and discussing who we should become in the future. One of his most famous paintings, Paul Gauguin, titled with three fundamental questions that never lose their importance in the realm of culture and the arts. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? These questions will lead me through my talk today. In a culture stretched between the past, present, and a vision of the future, repetitions and transformations, references and contestations, analogies and denials intertwine. The dispute about it, what it is, what it should be, whose it is, who is to decide about it, and how continues. Neither scientific analysis nor emotional impressions give a clear answer. Culture in its essence is a space of freedom and imagination, so it is alive and unlimited. Its beauty also lies in the fact that different people find different meanings and resonances in the same works. Culture invites you to think about contemporary challenges, opens the field for discussion, and asks questions about our yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So where do we come from? We come from the past, and it is not only a matter of our roots and heritage, but also of our immersion in history, constant sequences and repetitions of romantic sentiments, endless narratives about the injustices experienced, myths about greatness and merits. In her Nobel lecture, writer Olga Tokarczuk stressed, everyone knows that myths never really happened, but are always going on. In collective memory, facts are mixed with fiction, and the collective imagination is ruled by Retrotopia, a term coined by Zygmunt Bauman, which instead of hope for a better future, introduces nostalgia for the past. Maria Janion, Polish scholar, literary theorist, and critic, as well as feminist, wrote about Poles' attachment to old models and aversion to new perspectives in a letter to the participants of the Congress of Culture in 2016 in Warsaw. She said, "I have no doubts that our permanent inability to modernize is rooted in the phantasmic sphere, in the culture of the collective unconscious being attached to pain, the sources of which we touch with the greatest difficulty in the dark. A nation that cannot exist without suffering must inflict suffering on itself." Indeed, a culture that looks stubbornly backwards becomes a source of suffering, although it can be transformed into a space of wise remembering of their wrongs, both experienced and inflicted, and strengthening empathy in the next generations. The second question, who are we? Looking at the field of culture and Poles' participation in the realm of culture, numerous studies reveal a picture of Poles' cultural competencies and participation in culture, and it does not fill us with optimism. We are a community of not reading, not going to the opera, theater, or art galleries. So in consequence, the undeveloped, unstimulated imagination, sensitivity, and emotionality easily fall prey to populism, low quality cultural productions, or are simply driven by seasonal internet celebrities shamelessly flaunting their ignorance with simplified textual and visual messages. But an open society cannot function without culture, which is a space for dialogue in a spirit of respect for freedom and diversity. It is thanks to culture that we are able to better understand the increasingly complex world and build social bonds based on trust. This is of particular importance in the era of radical socio-political moods, the climate crisis, the galloping digitization, and the rise of technology in every sphere of life. Also in the deconstruction of the old order and the lack of a new one. The cultural sector is one of the prerequisites for an educated and open-minded society, necessary to maintain and strengthen democracy. Besides providing purely aesthetic experiences, art fosters creativity, stimulates imagination, educates, and inspires reflection. By creating shared experiences and welcoming participation, art and culture develop communities in a fragmented public sphere. Art brings together people of different opinions, interests, and backgrounds, showing perspectives and ways of life different than our own, and thus invites to exercise empathy. It can also help disenfranchised groups establish their own public arenas where they can freely express their collective identities. Art and culture reveal hidden truths and offer insights to provoke a new dialogue. The truth, which comes from the collision of different ideas and the emotional muscle of empathy, are the necessary tools for democratic citizenship, says Oskar Eustis, artistic director. Meanwhile, the sphere of culture has become a battlefield, a place where polarized narratives intersect. On the one hand, defenders of tradition, national identity, and on the other, apologists for openness, diversity, and freedom without any censorship. Instead of responding to modern challenges, we are divided, driven by extreme unhealthy emotions, and diverged on even the most minute issues. We find ourselves at a very special moment in which we have become hostages to divisions. When the populists took power in Poland in 2015, cultural sector experienced a turmoil, changes of directors of principal national institutions, a conspicuous shift in funding strategies, public protests against some works of art, state interventions in the programs of cultural institutions, new heads of institutions reoriented to a pro-state program, giving up a vision of contemporary art that is engaged in democratic issues. Many institutions adapted their activity to state-favored anniversaries and amply funded commemorations of historic events and figures. The loyalty of the institutions, of public institutions, is the direct result of their dependence from the state budget. But this applies not only to national institutions. The state, and particularly the Ministry of Culture, grants money to the vibrant non-governmental sector for their programs. A noticeable shift in kinds of projects that get funded is already a threat to the fragile NGO sector. I myself am an active member of the sector, working in 3 non-governmental organizations. And I must admit that the whole sector is experiencing a lot of hardships right now, some of political nature, many connected with lack of money. Coming back to the divisions, what else is of a divisive nature? Even a common language ceases to be fully common because among the conflicting sides, the same words take on different meanings. They serve narratives with distinctly different intentions. Again, I recall Olga Tokarczuk from her Nobel Prize speech. She says, "The world is a fabric we weave daily on the great looms of information, discussions, films, books, gossip, little anecdotes. Today, the purview of these looms is enormous. Thanks to the internet, almost everyone can take part in the process, taking responsibility or not, lovingly and hatefully, for better and for worse. When this story changes, so does the world. In this sense, the world is made of words. How we think about the world, and perhaps even more importantly, how we narrate it, have a massive significance, therefore. A thing that happens and is not told ceases to exist and perishes. This is a fact well known to not only historians, but also, and perhaps above all, to every stripe of politician and tyrant. He who has and weaves the story is in charge." So what is the story of what we have in common today? How do we find ourselves in a tangle of contradictory narratives? Here we need culture, literature, theater, music, film, visual arts to see what surrounds us and what we want to change. And the third question, where are we going? We must imagine the future first and strive to implement this vision despite the obstacles. The vision is saturated with the achievements of past generations, understanding of reality and our ideas about the directions of development in the context of future challenges. What are our ambitions and aspirations? What's ahead? How do we want to shape the culture of the future? Perhaps our imagination is limited by hopelessness and resignation. It is not enough to lament or glorify the national culture because we face challenges that do not recognize borders. The specter of a climate catastrophe, economic, political, and social crises. We must all take responsibility for the future, and it is in the space of culture that we can seek agreement, in the space of freedom and dialogue, where there is a place for many voices and experiences, for meeting those who are similar to us, but even more importantly, with those whose differences amaze us, but from whom we can learn and thus expand the boundaries of our own world. In order for this polyphony to be harmoniously heard in the recipient's ears, the recipient must be equipped with a number of competencies. The World Economic Forum report mentions critical thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence in high places among the competencies of the future. However, they are not reserved for the efficient functioning of the labor market. They are indispensable for full participation in culture and society and the reception of the social reality. One should also add curiosity and empathy to be willing to read the world in all its complexity and allow one to meet the other without being entangled in rigid narratives, stereotypes, and ungrounded assumptions. Culture and art make it possible to cultivate what in the dense world, multitude of stimuli and polarized narratives has the power to save: sensitivity. We need sensitivity to take care not only of our individual fate, but also the common good, to see the other and the difference of his or her experience, the world of nature, overheated and suffocated from human greed and thoughtlessness, crying out for mercy. We need an alliance of thinking, feeling, and sensitive people to imagine a fully fledged European demos and build a common future for the whole European community. They can meet in a space of culture that allows them to strengthen these key competencies: empathy, sensitivity, openness, critical thinking. These in turn will determine how we will shape our tomorrow together. With an ever-growing complexity of the world, with a plethora of unprecedented political, social, economic, and ecological challenges, art helps make sense of the world, of the reality, but also engages in combating these challenges. Art and culture actively participate in the public discourse, and artistic interventions help set the public agenda. They may provoke, challenge, build awareness, change conventions, call for reflection, and engage. Artists are committed and involved in all kinds of issues, and through their creative work, they shed light on matters ranging from human rights, ecological threat, economic inequalities, social injustice, fast developing technology, to freedom. Our future depends on how we will address these issues. Emerging through adversity and evolving through momentous global uncertainty, European democracy, as vulnerable as it is, needs support. Art and culture can and will have an important contribution in the process. The liberating power of the arts and culture can help us reimagine and remake society, hold up to a democratic ideal for our content, and foster community building. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this really interesting keynotes, Olga Brzezinska. I think you touched upon many, many important points, and it was a great overview of all the things that art can do in order to improve our sense of a European demos and our European democracy. So thank you so much. Before we go to the reflection of Simon, I was also curious to hear from you what kind of concrete recommendations you would like to give in order to make this more make this bigger, to make this impact bigger. What should be done?
Well, definitely the whole cultural sector, as compared to other sectors of social and economic life in the country, is impoverished. So it needs support. And this support is not only needed in terms of money. This is crucial for the activity to continue, for the creative work to be done, for the operation of institutions and non-governmental organizations. But it needs support also from the media. We talked about the media in the previous session. And the media needs to show us. Sylvia emphasized how important for the judges it was that the media talked about the problem, talked about the issue, presented it. This was support, and culture also needs that support. And in recent years, we've seen a huge drop in the interest of media in the cultural sector. So
Yeah, so financial support from the governments, from the EU maybe, but also media attention to show what the art scene is doing. Simon, I would like to give you the words next, because we've asked you to prepare a brief reflection on Olga's keynote. Simon Strauss is an author, journalist from Germany, works for FAZ, and is also working on a very interesting European opera project. Simon, if there's anything to add, please add it. And otherwise, I would like to ask you to give your reflection.
No, thank you very much for the invitation again. Thank you very much, Olga, for this very interesting and inspiring talk. I mean, I could basically confirm every line you said, and my enthusiasm about culture is, boundless and borderless. And so it's hard for me to actually react in a way which could lead to a discussion. But I will try to make just one point and somehow make this point against all of us. I listened to the interesting talks before, because in some sense culture and media share one characteristic, one could say, that in general, I'm saying, they are regarded by the public and by society as somewhere and somewhat left, you know, when you do like polls throughout like the normal citizenship, then they would probably not say that the majority of culture or media in their country, in European countries, are dominated by right-wing thinking. And I reflect on this from time to time, because obviously when we talk about culture and art and the independence of culture and art, then we have to take into account that we all come from a very distinct background, and that we are, more or less talking about an academic, privileged background of left liberal thinking. And the problems we discussed before, rightly so, I would add, are obviously felt in our community, and not so much in, for example, the community of unionists or people working in a hospital. So this is sometimes, I think, helpful for trying to put ourselves into the opposition in some sense, and then reflect on the role of culture maybe from a different angle. So again, me personally, I would kind of assign everything you said, and basically all the beautiful the beautiful beliefs you and I share. This is something we can use maybe to get, for example, money or funding or so. But I think in general, what we need in terms of our society is to maybe come back to a little bit more, I think, what Alicia said or someone else, the role of ambivalence in our perspective of culture. And I mean, for myself, I would argue that culture in itself is not left or right. Gramsci, for example, this famous Italian theorist, had this concept of cultural hegemony. So, you can use culture in both sense. I mean, obviously there was, in especially the history of my country, Germany, the usage of culture from the extreme right also. So that's why I would also always be a little bit skeptical when we, overload culture with the aspiration, for example, as you said in your first part of your speech, that arts and culture can have the capacity to make democratic governments and contribute to achieving this democratic goal. I would say yes, I hope so, but there are also times in history where culture, fueled non-democratic, even authoritarian movements. So this is one just brief point I wanted to make, that when we talk about culture, it's probably good that we reflect our own position and our own kind of background in it, and then try to think about the solution, as Anne-Marie always tells us to think about the solution of how can we make culture a more independent, a real independent sphere, and how can we talk about culture in a way that is not biased from the beginning, in the sense that it is only accepted acceptable or accepted in the left liberal sphere of our society. Because if we want culture to be, to have a bounding power of our society, which I think we all want to have, and then we need to also think about how can we attract people from the opposition, from the opposed fractions in our society, and how can we make the claim that culture actually brings people from different opinions together. I very much like this phrase when you said arts can bring people from different opinions together. This is the big hope and belief. I, as a cultural journalist, sometimes fear that we in general, only always think of people more or less with the same opinion of us, and when we talk about culture, when we talk about theater, when we talk about opera, when we talk about music or visual arts. This is the big challenge I think we face today in the 21st century, that we don't leave the cultural sphere, only, as a nice thing that, politicians think, okay, we can give money to because it's a nice thing to have for the elite, but to really accept the big fundamental powers of culture as a social force in some sense to bring people with different opinions together. And the worst thing, I'm ending with this, which can happen is that the left liberal sphere in itself in the culture, attacks each other. I mean, there are a lot of cases, especially in Germany now, with the cancel culture in some sense taking more and more over in the debates and discussions about culture. I think this is the most harmful thing we can do as cultural intellectuals, that we let this happen, because then there's no way from someone from a not so privileged academic background to enter our theaters, to enter our thinking worlds in some sense. So I would end with this, and I think we can also make a bridge, build a bridge to the debate before what the role of media is, because I think really the problems media and culture are facing today are somehow similar structurally. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. I think it's a really interesting question you posed. Like, how can we attract people from the opposition as well to come to our theaters and museums and performances? And I wanted to pose that question actually to you and to the rest of the group. How should we do that? What kind of art should we create in order to bring several groups of people together? Is there someone who wants to react to that question? Alicia?
Well, I'm actually surprised by the question in that sense that this is already happening. I think there are here among us in this little group. I'm not the only one who has written a novel or books, and we have a musician. It's not that my book is only read by people with the same political view as I am. This is already happening, and I think Olga was saying that between the lines that this is what art is doing, and it does already bring people together from different ideological backgrounds. I think if you go to the opera, you would look to the vote behavior, there will be a mixture. It will be a financially powerful group of the society for sure, but not immediately the same political view. So there is a problem that art is not, is sometimes expensive. Books are expensive for a lot of people in a society, so it's not everybody can just as easily move around and make use of the beautiful things out there. This is one thing, but I think it's already doing that. It can be improved, however. I agree. If Simon is going that way, it can be improved. I'm sure we can think how art can do more, but I also am very careful with instrumentalizing art and using it only as a tool, or immediately thinking, oh, I will write an opera to bring people together. So it's another thing again. It's a lot of big pressure on the shoulders of an artist, which is not always necessary.
And indeed, and maybe a second thing is also that art is never really impartial. That was also something I wanted to, or that's the question maybe. But I think that's interesting as well. Simon, would you like to react to what Alicia said?
Well,
and then we go to
I agree that we shouldn't instrumentalize art and culture too much, but that's basically where I started from, because in Olga's speech, you know, she was making the point that art and culture can basically make democratic governments be more understandable. So there's a democratic function of culture. And I was just saying, you know, I'm not quite so sure if not, for example, you can use or misuse culture also for authoritarian or other thinking. And that's why, you know, you understood me correctly. I would, you know, not make the point actually that culture should be, you know, politicized too much, because then, you know, you have right away the challenge of the political ideas, whereas the hope is that culture can help to overcome and bring a little bit more into the account the question which, you know, every human being in some sense poses, you know, the question about how we, you know, think about life and death, what we care for. And I mean, I would always say, you know, the most powerful moments of culture when they, you know, had the reflections of, for example, values like freedom or dignity of the human beings, and they were not trying to make clear points with it and saying, okay, this is good and this is bad, but you know, politics is in my sense, politics comes after culture. So we need culture first, and then politics comes after. And that's why from time to time, maybe this is just my German perspective, but when I look at our cultural institutions, they're very much in the mode of doing PR in some sense for a left-wing politics. So maybe that's different in Poland, and I know that the challenges you have in Poland, I mean, especially for theater, are crucial and hard. I mean, I just remember the fights of you know, some Oliver Friedrich, for example, who had productions in Warsaw, and he really had to fight for it against the Catholic right-wing politics. But you know, I'm just talking about the way we promote culture in the sense, you know, that's why what I think is crucial to debate about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. Calypso, your hand was raised already for some time. What would you like to recommend to this discussion?
Well, I want to speak to, you know, Simon's remark, not critique really, because it's a friendly remark from Simon, but to Olga's wonderful speech and keynote, to the extent that what I heard from Olga is a kind of meta-politics, you know, to the words she used, you know, to hear polyphony, sensitivity, meet in a space. Now, all of these words I heard as, you know, art as togetherness. And of course, you know, we can all have the romantic idea of the artist on the hill, you know, thinking about his destiny. I say his advisedly, because 19th century romantics were usually men, sadly. Well, women were romantic, but they were in their kitchen or in the salon or wherever they were. So in any case, sure, of course, artists should do whatever they want to do and think about whatever, but what are we with Dibali? What have we talking about for years, actually, ever since, I don't know, the first time I met you guys, you know, in Amsterdam, and we talked about this. You know, we are concerned with democracy, but in the very broad sense. And Simon, I don't hear democracy as left or right. We're concerned about how we live together in a better way. And it's hard because people have their own lives and they like to stay at home and they have things to do. And so how do you create togetherness? Now, yes, it so happens that in Poland today, to create this togetherness from bottom up happens to be connected with a political agenda. But I think that we should all recognize the metapolitical, you know, function of art. In fact, I have friends, biologists, who work on the art instinct of biology. It's the most basic human kind of need, but biology as in surviving together in the jungle. And you need art for that, because of reasons we could, you know, expand on. So, so I am all for Olga's, sorry, Olga, I'm kind of paraphrasing what you said, but, you know, art as a gateway to participation, empathetic participation and participatory democracy. There's no excuse. And I just want to share with you the fact that I just actually engaged in this. I've been doing kind of participatory debating through theater and Greek mythology for quite a while now because of my, you know, last book, which was kind of on that. But with my students at EUI in Florence, we just did a big play, which was the political play, which we showed outside. It was the first play in the post-pandemic in a big Roman theater in Fiesole, and called Time to Retreat. You can find it on the web. And this was about Europe and the world. So it was a very political play. But the students, contrary to the officialdom, you know, we were part of a program on the State of the Union where there was a lot of officialdom, interesting people, but we kind of know what they're going to say. And then it's back to our conversation about critiquing Europe. Now, if my students who are in their 20s are going to do a play on Europe and the world, they are going to be critical. There will be, you know, the Syrian refugees and the Egyptian refugees who will talk about how the EU, you know, didn't do anything about Sisi. And that's mildly put, et cetera, et cetera. You know, coming from the young, you'll have the critical gaze and there is no pulling back. And that's not easy because if you consider, you know, funding and all sorts of consideration. So we're not just talking about, I don't know, critiquing the Polish government in Poland, but we're talking about any critique. And yet, and that play, I have to say, I'm very proud of my students and what we did, you know, was highly successful and pretty unique. But part of our premise was that art, in this case theater, was about engaging audience. And we put a lot of energy through word clouds and all sorts of innovative, you know, approaches to engage the audience in a COVID time where you have to be social distance. So that wasn't that easy. And so to me, the reflection, the kind of conceptual reflection that comes from this adventure, which was real fun, is a reflection on the idea of publics. And note how we use publics in two different ways. You know, we have publics as in European demos or demoi, the public as in public services or who the state is, you know, the political sense, and then the public as audience. And so in my view, and that's what I tried to develop in that play, and I actually say it in the play, you know, engaging audience and engaging citizens can be one and the same thing. Or at least we need to think about these two things, these two démarches together. Yeah. And how do you engage publics, audiences as citizens, and citizens as, you know, audiences that become participatory. Yep. And there is so much potential. And that's how I also heard what Olga was speaking about. So to me, we don't need to engage in a conversation about is art political or not. It is metapolitical, and that's good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this really interesting example. I wanted to give the word to Gregors and also reflect a bit on what you said earlier in this session, that you were quite pessimistic, and I'm curious to hear from you how you listen to Olga's keynote, and also what you think that you are a theater director. What can theater do in order to kind of bring this further?
Thank you. I'm so much, you know, stick to the history of Poland and Europe, and some things loop again, and that's what Simon said, that this about this PR left liberal wings. We experienced it in Poland, and that I think is like big problem, that we really focus on this new liberal ideas, and somehow we been very excited about it, and we lost a big society of Poland. We lost as an artist, I can say, and I was the part as well about this. We work a lot internationally, and I work a lot for the big cities in Poland. But nowadays this situation is very critical because we are in the other side. We don't have any longer Minister of the Culture in Poland. I think since 3-4 years, that's for sure we have the Minister of the Propaganda. And all this scam, all these things, what they, how their strategy is really repeating again. That is like strong propaganda. There is controlling all the theaters. I think nowadays only in Warsaw, the few theaters left because we have a big support from the town, which is very liberal, and from Warsaw audience as well, and Warsaw intellectuals, and and media as well. But we lose the contact with this side of the right wings people thinking, and even those people are not right wings thinking. They are very religious, frightened people, and they're still thinking about Second War. Because they are frightened that the Germans, that's as Miłosz said some examples, that there's everywhere. The media organized by them are very, very well, and they're really getting to each house. Like we dream about, we dream about it, that this literature is supposed to go on each village house in the 19th century. Now we have the situation. And what we did, we started the program of Teren Polska was called, and we went to the small towns and make it more performances in Poland. But as well, we've been cutting off with the subsidized, because all the culture institutions in Poland are controlled by government.
Yeah.
So that is this situation that we're somehow in the statement of a big struggle. And
yeah, I totally imagine.
That's, if you know what I would like to say before that is like, I think the people in Poland believe very much in values. This is a very religious country, but values are very important. And apart from money, and of course the big support for the independent media in Poland, we need as well, from my point of view, we need as well, not ideology, but we need the message, we need the values. And and I remember when I was in the communist time, and Pina Bausch and other artists.
Sorry to interrupt you, Gregors, but we still have limited time, and I also
sorry.
So if you could finish your point, we go to Bassem, because he also prepared a reflection. And
Okay. Yes, I'm giving up.
No, you can finish your point, but
now it's like that is like now it's like a completely different situation which we find now. And this situation of fighting for those people and gathering people together, but as well there's a situation that we fight for the values, and I think the values are very important for the people.
Yeah, thank you so much for making this point. I wanted to go to Bassem and then give the final word with all reactions to Olga, and then we end the session. Bassem, I'm very much looking forward to hear your reflection.
Well, I had prepared something else to speak about. We're responding to Olga, but the discussion went really very in detail, and like the things that are mentioned, Calypso, Grzegorz, everybody, is very interesting. But like what I want to say in general, it's a discussion for a 1-week conference. I think it's not 1 hour and a half. So to hold all these themes and all these problems and what we should do in the culture. I agree with most of the things. I disagree with many things, but just in general to watch about the democracy, the monarchy, the socialism, all the political system that I didn't see that, but the humanity saw during the centuries, the art was always there, and the art will always survive. Every political system may fall, may be weak, may be strong, but the art will be there and will find a way to expose itself, the music, the theater, the literature. So this is very important to just know, but we need help, of course. Of course, we need help. The system, the democracy, what could do to the art, and the art, what could do to the democracy. This is a thing, I think it's very personal. If we speak about art, we speak about personal things. What is wrong and what's happening in the programs that are in the European Union, we know them, and in the local governments, they are imposing a funding for a project. There is no freedom for a composer, for a writer to write about his own subjects, what he feels, what he sees. There is always like a way that this is the field you write about. I don't know. I took part from many projects which were some of them were really great and gave a lot to the society, but I don't think they gave a lot to the art, as the art with the capital A, let's say, because of, you're doing a thing, you're catching minorities, you're catching people that they don't come to the theater to encourage them to come to see, and then you have to do a product that it's not totally art that people will not understand. But this is one thing about what Calypso said, engaging the public with what's doing. I don't know if it's a good idea. I don't know it's the aim of art. If we go to the past and we see the culture, how it works, and what I want to speak about, the culture and the media, that they have to work together to enhance and to help the democracy, because it's the only way that we can manage. It's because the medias, whenever they speak about something, it's right now happening. But when it's past last month, last year, it's already history. It's not at all a theme that interests the media. They are living the facts that are happening now. The culture reaches the past and goes very far to the future. And what Olga said, said about asking questions, and I think the art, the culture is giving directions also. We have to see these directions. If we come back to the past and check the magic flute of Mozart, it's not a children's play. It's about many philosophical, very deep matters that a normal person who goes to the opera, maybe he will not understand that. You need an intelligent person to understand who is really the Queen of the Night and who is really Zarastro. Well, and you see the art finds, the composers, the artists, they always find the solution to give what they want, what they need to give. But going in another way also, we, the artists, starting from me and the other, we are spoiled. And this is a problem. And we are really spoiled. The medias also, they are spoiled. We reached a moment that we lost our mission in life, and I think we have to go back, and this is why I come back to the thing that I prepared. I will speak really briefly because we already, I think it's 5 o'clock. I don't want to take a lot of time, maybe in another occasion, because I wanted to show one thought that I had about the beginning of 20th century, which is a key of all what's happening now. We always look to the point, what is happening now? What is happening in Poland in the politics now? But we never look to the history to learn from it. Beginning of 20th century, in many fields, we had destroying everything, destroying the tonality, with Schoenberg writing Pelon Lunaire and having an atonal music. It's not already yet the system that the system that he made with the serialism, with the 12-tone music, but it's atonal. We see in the classical physics that we already know, and then suddenly we have the quantum mechanics that enters and in a way destroys all the thoughts that we had before. We see the whole changes of political systems, everything happening in the beginning of 20th century. It led to a First World War, it led to a Second World War, and it's leading to a Third World War if we don't react on that. Right? And what we are doing, we are living the moment. Nobody's analyzing really what's happening and looking globally to all the problems that we have in culture, in democracy. In Lebanon, they found it before. Now in Poland, they found the key how to use democracy for their own interests. And this is the very unsafe moment that it's legal, but it's not all right, because we have to remember that democracy is the majority, but it's also taking care and the rights of the minority here. And we're forgetting about this in this way, like just taking the majority. And what is the European Union doing now? The politicians of they really knows well what to do with the European Union. But there is another issue here. They have an obsession about how to win the next local elections. This is it. This is the problem. How to win the elections. So we're using the media, so we're using the art, so we're using and the opposition, it's the same situation. So I think I try to be as brief as possible, but really I had a long thought, but I just shorten it because we run out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bassem. And indeed, we would have loved to hear more from you, because I think it was a really interesting talk. And I'm still very curious to hear, like, if the artists are indeed spoiled, we should fight for a democracy now. Look at the past, etc. What you would like to see from them now? Should they go out to the street? Should we go out to the street? Or what would you propose? Maybe you can briefly reflect on it, and then I will give Olga the final word.
Well, what we should do, I think I'm working on myself personally, it's actually trying, I work also I'm a conductor, I work in an orchestra. In an orchestra, there is no place for democracy at one point, and there is everything is, because each group is, if every group will be playing what they want to do, so you have a big chaos. So you need that leader. So this is why it's not a good example to show one and second, but there is one thing, it's talking, it's speaking, it's just coming back to an idea. If we have the idea of democracy, when I stand in front of the orchestra, it's not about dictator, it's about a higher idea, the music. And this is the idea that we should have, in fact, the art, the democracy, and fighting for that, and not fighting for left or right or religion or I don't know what. It's just the highest point, the humanity and the good of the humanity. This is the briefest I can say.
Yeah, it was really brief and fantastic. So thank you so much for that, Bassem. Olga, I wanted to give you the final words, and I really know that people have to leave, so we will wrap it up in a few minutes, but just for you, the last opportunity to react to this.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Bassem, and thank you, Alicia and Grzegorz and Calypso for sharing your thoughts after the talk. And I realized that we're here, as in the field of culture and arts, we're in the learning zone. Culture is not a product itself. It's a process, and that's why we're constantly adapting and learning, and we're exposing ourselves to an influx of ideas. And it was great to hear your opinions after I shared what I shared. And I think that there are more dividing lines than just the right wing and the left wing. So more dividing lines that keep people away from culture or help people attend or encourage participation. And I briefly mentioned in my talk competencies, and that this is just a tiny fragment of what we could say about the whole education, not only cultural education, but that is happening in schools, but also education to cultural life that is happening in at home, for example, or within your peer group. So this is something that might keep people away from participation because they have not gotten used to doing so. Also, speaking from my experience, I'm a president of a foundation, so I have duties of a president, which means I need to secure funding, I need to take care of my team, I need to take care of the activities that I plan to do with my foundation and with my people. But also, I'm program director of a poetry festival, Miłosz Festival. And when I compared the modes, the two different modes I am in, when I program, I completely forget about political views. I am doing it because this just flows from my heart. This is something that I want to do, I need to do, and I want to give to people. So this is my gift And my only hope is that people would like to come and take this gift and be part of it, what we're creating. And we're not giving them a product, we're giving them a space to come together and to have a voice. They may like it or dislike it, and we learn from it. So here I come back to the learning zone.
Yeah.
As a representative of the foundation, I need to work and be in touch with the whole political scheme, because I need to apply for grants. I need to report to the Ministry of Culture how I am spending the money, and everything needs to be accounted for. So this is different. But here, the purpose is what comes to mind as a North Star. I don't really care if I am writing an application for a project. I don't care who personally the minister is, because I know for a fact that what I am doing, I am trying to make the best use of the public money I can get access to. And this is solely for the purpose to give it to people, to bring them in, and to have something to share with them. So this is it. And I'm absolutely, I am forever grateful to Calypso for such a wonderful and totally on point. How she paraphrased what I said. This is, in fact, about metapolitics. This is what, because I don't want to get entangled in politics and dichotomy of left, right. I think that the sentence you said, Calypso, art as togetherness, is what sums best what I really wanted to say. And here I believe everything starts. If we can come together, it doesn't have to be everybody at the very beginning, but we need to start from somewhere. And this is how I see a foundation as cultural institution, as an agent of change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olga. And I would like to thank all speakers of today, because we really have to wrap it up here. Unfortunately, I think we could have continued this conversation for hours, but I would like to thank you very much, Sylvia, Bassem, Milo, Juri, Olga, Simon, and all the other great speakers of today. I very much hope that you inspired each other, you inspired me, and I think we got a lot of ideas that we can include in this final statement of the Civic Council on European Democracy. I hope to see you all back during one of the next sessions of the Forum on European Culture we're going to organize. Please keep in touch, and for now, I'm wishing you a great evening and hope to see you back. Thank you so much.